Hi, I'm Nikki Grubbs, Assistant Superintendent of School Leadership, here to talk with you about grading practices in North Thurston Public Schools. All of our work surrounds around a central text called Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman, which includes research from the last 10 to 15 years from various educational researchers about equity within grading practices. Our learning targets today are to learn about the shift in grading practices, think about how the shifts will help student learning, and generate questions for me, which you can email me, and I'll give my email address the very last slide of this presentation. The North Thurston Public School Board supports the shift in these grading practices. A few years ago, the school board recognized the need for more consistency as they heard from the community about grading practices that were different from classroom to classroom, school to school, and grade level to grade level. They also want to be really clear and help parents and students to understand what grades mean. And then finally, they would like to empower student learners so that kids feel that when they put in effort and they work hard, that they can see an increase in their grades. I've been talking with local colleges lately about the shift in grading practices, just to make sure that they don't have any concerns or questions about transcripts. First of all, transcripts that they receive from North Thurston Public Schools that incorporate some of these new grading practices will look very similar, if not identical, to what transcripts have shown colleges and universities in the past. These are the local colleges that I've been talking to, and all of them have been extremely thoughtful and really appreciate the equity lens that we have and why we are shifting our practices. All of our work around grading practices is tied to two of our goals in our strategic plan for the district. The first goal is goal 4, continuous growth for all students in all subjects. By having teacher clarity around what kids need to know and what they need to be able to do, it'll be easier for kids to understand what work needs to be done to move forward and reach proficiency. Another goal that it's tied to is goal 5, preparedness for post-secondary success. We should be able to see an increase in our graduation rate after implementing many of these practices. We're conducting what's called standards reference grading. You may have heard in other parts of our state or the country some districts launching into something called standards-based grading. And that's where you would receive a report card that has every standard listed for every classroom and a grade for each of those. We're launching into standards reference grading, very similar to what we're doing now, where teachers develop their unit plans, daily lesson plans, classroom activities, and all the tests are linked back to the standards. Most courses in our district have state or national standards. We also take annual tests called the Smarter Balanced Assessments or the Washington Comprehensive Assessment for Science in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. Why are we focused on grading practices? We want to see an increase in student learning. And we should be able to see that because learning expectations will be clearer to students. With the use of rubrics, they'll really clearly understand what they need to know and be able to do in order to earn each level on a rubric. We should see a decrease in student failure, especially for students who have historically fallen into an achievement gap. And with teacher clarity comes more trust between a teacher and a student, because students know exactly what they're expected to do and they don't have to play a guessing game as things shift from what kids learn to what's expected on the test. And then also, there should be a focus on learning rather than a commodity of earning points. And we know that these practices will increase student motivation. We see a national achievement gap across the US where it's predictable for students of different races in how their outcomes will play out. We're working towards equity so that all the outcomes are expected outcomes for kids should not be predictable based on their race. Let me show you an example of a North Thurston data sheet. This demonstrates recent data around the English language test, math, and science. It shows you the rate at which kids are achieving standard based on their race. You can see those predictable outcomes that happen nationally based on race. What we would like to see are equivalent outcomes for students of all races. Every kid should be able to access learning in a fair and equitable way so that we have high achievement for every student. Let's take a minute to compare a 0 to 100 point scale to a 0 to 4 point scale. This will give you an idea of why we are trying to shift from that 100 point scale that we were all graded with in school to the 4 point scale and why it's more fair. The 100 point scale has 3 times as many gradations to failure as to meeting proficiency. It's very much a lopsided scale that emphasizes failure. It dedicates triple its proportion to failure. It's also really hard for a teacher to distinguish between 100 different levels on the 100 point scale for kids. For example, what's the difference between a 73 and a 74? That's not easy to explain. Whereas a 4 point scale is more precise, objective, and reliable. And the use of rubrics, which describe what kids need to do and be able to understand in order to earn a score, makes it very clear for kids, and it helps to increase our good outcomes for kids. Here's a chart that shows the difference between a 100 point scale and a 4 point scale. 60% of the 100 point scale is devoted to failure because 0 to 59 points is an F. What this does is it makes it next to impossible for a student who's missing 2 to 3 assignments to be able to recover from failure or recover from that 0. Whereas a 4 point scale, only the 0 is dedicated to failure, and that's 20% of the scale. So this makes it more fair. We have a scale where each level is worth the same thing, and much of the scale is dedicated towards proficiency, meeting standard, and at least passing classes. Cumulative is the student reporting system that we're going to be using next year. It's an upgrade to our Skyward. It'll still be a Skyward product, but it's an upgrade and has features that are more accessible to us. This cumulative grade book will have the ability to allow teachers to input a 4-point scale or a 100-point scale. So it is a transition year next year, 2023 to 24. Some teachers have nearly all of their assignments graded on a 4-point scale already. So those teachers will be able to continue to use the 4-point scale. Teachers who don't have as many of their assignments converted to the 4-point scale can continue to use their 100-point assignments while at the same time designing their assignments into a 4-point scale. This allows for teachers at different levels in the process to all be able to participate in the same gradebook. The intent is to eventually move to a pure 4-point scale. We also have descriptor language that tells parents, students, and teachers exactly what each level of a 4-point scale means. In the secondary grading scale that we've created, a 4 means that the student have met proficiency towards their own grade level standards, but they can go a little bit more deeply. They can teach a peer, or they can use the knowledge that they've gained and apply it in new and novel situations. Students can still earn a 0. So if the student does no work, shows no evidence that he or she knows the information or can accomplish the skills, he or she may receive a 0, especially if the student is absent a lot. However, students who don't submit assignments, but perhaps they are engaged in discussions and show the teacher that they do have knowledge and they've gained some skills from the class, they may be able to earn a 1, which is considered beginning. Rubrics are very clear descriptors around each level, a 4, 3, 2, or 1, that tells the student what they need to know or understand. And I'm going to show you an example of a rubric. This is an example of a rubric for mathematics. It's a pretty holistic rubric. Some will have more details and specifics than this. Some rubrics have multiple attributes that teachers are looking at, whereas some rubrics just have one attribute. And teachers can use a variety of different types of rubrics. Here's a really simple one that was posted in a classroom that's written in kid-friendly language. And it really gets at the gist of a 4-point rubric. One idea that we're reaching for is consistency among departments and content areas. We want teachers to have grading practices that are more alike than different. One myth that we've been hearing is that all kids are going to be able to pass with this new methodology. And that's simply not true. It will give kids more access to the learning, and they'll be able to recover more easily if they do their work after having a 0 in the grade book. So that's the biggest point, that kids can recover from low scores. But it is still possible to get a 0 if students don't participate at all and they show 0 evidence that they know or understand the content. Another myth that is taking place is this idea that students will no longer be able to get an A. For us in the secondary level, our 4 means that they're still working at their own grade level and they've met proficiency, but they can go a little bit deeper. Perhaps they can even teach up here the content or the skills. So a 4 is not working at the next grade level like it is in our elementary schools. So our students who are high achieving and hard workers will continue to be able to access high scores such as a 4 and an A. This is a sample of our grading scale. It shows the letter grade, the percent if put in with 100 points, or what it looks like on the 4-point scale. Another grading practice that we like to promote is giving kids multiple opportunities to show what they know and are able to do. So not just the classic paper pencil tests, but they can do other things to show what they know. Maybe a presentation, answering questions, uh, asking questions, doing a culminating project, having a performance, or reflecting about their learning. Those are just some examples. Another idea in our grading practices is grade the work, not the timing of the work. So if a student is late in submitting work, we still accept the work because that work is important. And we don't want to decrease the value of having completing that work. It's better to produce high quality work submitted after the deadline than to cut learning short. So even in the real world where there are deadlines, most people in the workplace, if they need extended time, can request that. And we wouldn't tell somebody at work, well, you didn't turn this in on time, so don't do it at all now. This is a quote for reflection from a teacher. Take a minute to read that quote. That's a teacher's idea of how she shifted in her thinking around the submission of late work. We want our grades to be bias resistant. So we want to grade what they're learning in regards to the standards, not necessarily their behavior in class. We want those two things to be separated. This would minimize the effects of implicit bias. It's a bias that every one of us has, but we may not realize that we have it. A set of assumptions and beliefs that are subconsciously ingrained in us from an early age. Our traditional system exacerbates disproportionality. And so, what I mean by that is that if you are incorporating behavior of a student into the grade, it may not reflect what he or she knows and understands because we're looking at how students are acting in class. So we want those two things to be separate. We know behavior is really important, but our grades should reflect knowledge and skills towards the standards. There's also this idea of weighting more recent performance because it's a more accurate measure of what the student knows as a final outcome. And we're not penalizing kids for their practice assignments like homework. Many of our teachers weight their grades so that the tests are worth more than what the practice daily assignments are worth. And so that is a practice where you give weight to the tests or the culminating projects. Those weigh more in the grade than the practice. Also, we don't want students to get a single group grade. Sometimes when kids work in a group, it's one or two students who do all the work while other students don't participate. And we don't think that that's fair. We want kids to continue earning individualized scores when they work in a group. Homework. Homework is intended for practice. Students are making mistakes in homework and then correcting them. And the science shows that when we make a mistake and we're able to correct it, that is the most significant way to learn and to remember. We don't want students penalized for their mistakes during practice. And also, we don't want a student's home environment to affect their ability to complete homework. So we don't want to penalize kids for something that they can't control, like their home environment. Extra credit. Extra credit is sometimes not connected to the learning. Like it could be bring in a canned food for a canned food drive, or attend a play or a movie outside of school to get extra credit. So again, we don't want a student's environment that's out of their control to impact their grade. So there might be students who aren't able to get to those extra activities. They don't have transportation, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources to get them there. Completing an optional review activity before a test shouldn't be extra credit. If it's important, if it's worth a grade, it should be required for all kids. We also see that research confirms that lower achieving students simply do not complete extra credit. Here's another idea that we're promoting: allowing for retakes. Learning depends on mistakes, but only when there's opportunity to correct them. Students must be able to fix their errors and give it another try until they succeed. Students who get to redeem themselves with retakes become more motivated, and every student should have a chance to retake and learn from mistakes. But the teachers get to decide what needs to be completed in order to retake an exam, for example. Also, there will be some grading categories that teachers have. We're trying to make those more similar than different. And within content areas, we want teachers to have the same names of grading categories. Some of those categories will be considered formative, which means the practice, like daily work. Some of it will be summative. And if you see that word, that means like final tests, final projects, that kind of thing. That concludes a review of all the grading practices that we're focused on in North Thurston. Thank you so much for participating. And if you generated any questions while watching this video, please feel free to email me. Thank you for your time.